What's up, everybody? So this is going to be part two of my I wouldn't call it a series, but just my my Ruby Sapphire Emerald in-game tier list. So part one is up on my channel right now. It's been up for a week. If you haven't watched that yet, I would go watch that first. My recording software had some issues, so I just decided to make this video into two parts. So we left off at Grumpig being a decent, which means we're on to Sandslash, who I'm going to put into meh. So Sandslash I'm putting in here because there's just better ground types with better stats and better moves littered throughout the game. Golem is a good example. There's Rhydon later on. There's Flygon, which we'll see in a minute. But yeah, Sandslash is kind of just outclassed. Its stats are good enough for it to be out of awful, and it's useful in a decent amount of the fights that you can use it in once you get it. But realistically, it's outclassed, so I don't really see any reason to have it anywhere above meh. Alright, Spinda is one of the worst Pokemon ever. It's pretty cut and dry. It has 60 in each base stat. It can get some cool moves, I guess, like Teeter Dance is cool. But this thing is not even close to worth using. It's not useful in any fights. There's a bajillion better normal types in these games. Spinda, the only thing interesting about Spinda is that there's like 4 billion different, well, I guess sprites that it can be. So like with the dot patterns and everything, which I don't know how they even program that in the game. But yeah, that's the only thing interesting about Spinda because it is garbage. Skarmory, it's one of my favorites. I'm gonna put it up in great. Skarmory obviously has very good physical defense. Its really problems are only gonna come from fire types and electric types, which after you get Skarmory, the only trainer with those like in a prevalent way is Flannery. Other than her, Steel Flying, like it's not a super great offensive type, but this Pokemon really excels defensively. It has a lot of resistances. It it has the stats. It has decent enough moves to make it work. Like you can teach it Steel Wing. Fly, obviously. It'll definitely work. You can Toxic Protect, something like that if you'd like. Um, yeah, I don't see how it can be anywhere but in the great tier. It's not good enough or used enough really to be in the busted, but it has enough utility to keep it out of decent, and it has good stats, so I think great makes sense for it. Flygon, I'm gonna put into decent. Flygon is pretty close to being able to go in great. I would say if you could give it a physical dragon move or a little bit more physical coverage, then it could probably be in great. But as it stands, it's indecent. So it has very high speed, great physical attack. It's useful for Steven for sure. It's useful in a good amount of fights. It's useful against Drake, but there are better options for a fast physical attacker. Its moves somewhat leave something to be desired. Um, it's not bad though. It has the stats, um, and Levitate is a very good ability. It does have a couple of immunities that can be useful. So Flygon, I want to put it in great, but as for now, it's in decent. Cacturne is also going to go into decent. It would be a better candidate for great if it got a little bit stronger of stab moves, a little bit better of coverage, or was not a grass type, because as you know, grass types are bad. But it is one of the better dark types in these games, and it can be useful for Phoebe for sure. It can be useful against Juan and Wallace because of its grass typing, but even then you have to hedge and be careful. So I would say Cacturne definitely good, but it gets outclassed by Sceptile for sure. So I wouldn't put it anywhere but decent. Altaria is also going to go into decent. It has a good typing. Dragon Flying is good. It's useful against pretty much everybody besides Glacia and Juan and Wallace's ice types, and maybe Steven as well. But other than that, it actually is super good defensively for the later part of the game. It's a dragon type, which obviously helps. It has good defensive stats. There are better dragon type. Well, there's one better dragon type that you can get later on, however, which keeps it out of great because once you get to that dragon type, there's really no reason to use this. And even Flygon, I would say, is probably better than it overall. So yeah, it's decent, but it's nothing special. I'm gonna put Zangoose in great. So Zangoose has really good stats on its own, and then you realize it has guts, I think. No, wait, it has immunity in these games. I'm gonna keep it in great. So it has really good stats. It has a really wide move pool. You get it at a point where it's gonna be useful. It's useful against Norman. You just gotta give it the right coverage, and it can be useful in pretty much any battle that isn't the Phoebe battle. But even still, you might be able to find a way to use it. Zangoose is a very strong physical attacker. You get it early enough to where it's useful, and normal types are generally, as a rule of thumb, good when they have the stats and the moves to back up what they're able to do. So yeah, Zangoose, great. I don't know why Seviper isn't next to Zangoose because they're kind of supposed to be like brother sister, not brother sister. They're rivals, which is kind of the opposite of being somebody's brother. But yeah, they're rivals, so I'll just put them together. So Seviper I put into decent because it has good physical and special attack, which helps it, but it's frail and it's slow. And its move pool is okay, but it's not like super duper wide. And it's like, and Poison Fang and Poison Tail, which are like its signature, not its signature, but kind of what it uses, they're not bad. Like they have the poisoning side effects, but they're not strong. I would say Seviper, like poison types, again, it's kind of in the same lane as Muck and Weezing. Like if there were more use for them, they would be higher up in the tiers, but like there's really just not great use for a pure poison type, excuse me. Like Zangoose is going to be better than Seviper every day for every reason. Like it's a bit of a lopsided rivalry in Gen 3 with Zangoose and Swiper. Alright, so speaking of Pokemon, I can put together Lunatone and Solrock. So they're both rock psychic and they're basically just physical and special counterparts of each other, with Solrock being physical and Lunatone being special. Their attack stats for special and physical, like, as they go, are okay. They're kinda not super useful unless you're like in a fight with Team Magma, because they do have Levitate, which is really good. But they're not super useful in any of the fights left in the game. Maybe useful for Glacia, but even then you have to be careful. Because Walreign's a water type and Glalie usually has Crunch. But yeah, they're not bad. But they're not great. I'm also going to put Whiscash in this tier. So Whiscash is really kind of carried by its typing, which is Water Ground, which is obviously really good, as I talked about with Swampert in part 1. But Whiscash definitely leaves something to be desired in the stat department. Its base stats are not high. It has decent bulk, but not really great attacking stats. It gets Earthquake and Surf. It gets the good moves. But it really is kind of just outclassed by other water types, and especially Swampert. So I don't think it deserves to be in great, but it'll definitely stay out of meh because its typing is really good. And you get it early enough to where it can be useful in fights against like Steven and Tate and Liza and things like that. So it's a decent Pokemon. Crawdaunt. I would say it's about exactly the same as Sharpedo. It's a little bit more bulky, but it's a little slower. They're basically they have the same issues. They're water dark physical attackers in a generation that doesn't support that at all. They're useful in the Magma fights and against Steven and against Phoebe and things like that, but you know, its special attack is still okay. It's literally just like Sharpedo, but like slower and bulkier. Like it has a use, but it's outclassed by other water types and is in an unfortunate situation with how its stats are spread out. Okay, Claydol. Ooh, I like Claydol. I'm gonna put Claydol in Great. That's a little controversial, but hear me out. So Claydol is really good defensively. It gets Levitate, which is a really good ability. Its typing in these games is good for defensive use. Like the only two battles where you really won't be able to use it to any extent are Phoebe and Sydney. But even then, like it's even though it's a ground type, like it can still be useful in the aqua fights and against Juan and against Wallace in the right spots because of how bulky it is. And again, its typing is conducive to that. Its stats are really good. Its move pool is also conducive to that. Like you can give it the offensive moves that it needs while giving it defensive like creative options like cosmic power. You can give it toxic. You can do things like that. I've used this Pokemon a few times. Like it definitely has the defensive utility that you would want out of a defensive Pokemon like this. Cradily, ooh, I would say Cradily goes in decent, so it's kind of just a watered down. Yeah, I would say it's a watered down version of Claydol. Its grass typing does not help it. Again, grass type's not great, but grass rock actually isn't a bad dual typing to have. So its grass typing kind of gets mitigated by that, but its move pool is kind of where it falls short. It really has a lot of trouble doing damage for most of the game. It's TM reliant to do pretty much any sort of real damage, and even then, it's not going to be great output. It does have great defensive stats again, but they are a little bit lesser than Claydol's. It doesn't have the great ability that Claydol has. You get them around the same time. I would say Claydol in the defensive role outclass it, and if you wanted a grass type or a rock type, it's outclassed in that respect too. So it's just hard to put it anywhere but decent. I'm almost tempted to put Armaldo. I'm going to put Armaldo in Matt. So Armaldo in Oras is on the complete other side of this tier list. It's super strong. It has great moves. It has good typing, but in these games, it's really it gets no moves to support itself. Like it gets no real rock type help. It gets no bug type help because no bugs get bug type help. Like it's hard to put a bug anywhere that isn't like in this area in the bottom three tiers. The only reason Ninjask is higher is because it has more utility and is available earlier. Excuse me. And Armaldo just like you get it after Flannery. If you could get it before Flannery and it like had a good rock type option that wasn't like Rock Tomb by TM or something, then it would probably be higher. But it's in meh because it's supposed to be a physical attacker and it can't really do that. And it's a rock type, which doesn't help it against the later part of the game. So yeah, I would say meh. It's also definitely outclassed by things like Golem and Aggron and even Ninjask to an extent. But yeah, it's not really even a bug type, so you can't really count it as that. Wigglytuff, I'm gonna put into decent. It's really more so just outclassed than anything else. Like there's no real reason to use it above like Xploud or Zangoose or something like that. It does have better bulk than those two Pokemon, but it doesn't hit anywhere close to as hard. Again, it doesn't get stab that's conducive to its higher special attack than physical attack. It does have a super wide move pool though, so you can get creative with it. It does have the really high HP, so its bulk ends up being good because of it. There's just not a huge reason to use it, in my opinion, in these games. It is outclassed by things that you can get earlier that pack more of a punch, that have about the same move pool. All right, so Milotic, this is an interesting case. You could make the argument that this Pokemon is awful because of how you're forced to catch it if you want it and evolve it into a Milotic. So the time investment there is definitely not fun, but if you're willing to look past that, this is a great Pokemon. It has great physical bulk and good special attack. It can do everything that you would want out of a bulky water type. It's available at a point in the game where it's going to be useful. The only real battles you're missing out on are Flannery and Roxanne. So yeah, this thing, it's definitely really good. You just have to be super patient with it to catch it and evolve it. But you get a very quality water type out of it. Uh, Castform. I'm gonna put it in meh just because it does fill something of a niche. It is very unique, and its stats are not great at all, but it's okay. Like you can find ways to use Castform. It has forecast obviously, which changes forms in the weather, so it's not really a normal type. You can't really call it a normal type. It's very unique in that sense where it changes types all the time. If you're building your team around some sort of weather, then this thing is going to be super useful because Weather Ball powered up is really strong. But you just have to be careful about the weather if you're going to use it for something like that. Otherwise, having to set up the weather to make it into a useful Pokemon does not help its case at all. So, Med is for Castform. If it had better stats, then it would definitely be higher. But its uniqueness keeps it out of the awful tier. I'm gonna put Staryu in kind of in the same light at well, yeah, I'm gonna put Staryu in great just because it has super good stats and a super good move pool. It's a classic glass cannon special attacker. Water Psychic is a very good typing. It's useful from when you catch it onward because of its coverage, and it's again you have to be patient for it because it's available by Super Rod only, I believe. So it's not available for that much of the game, but where it is available, it definitely stands out as being really good. You just have to wait a while to get it, which is kind of true with the rest of the Pokemon on these lists because you have to have at least 5 badges, if not 6, or well, no, I would say 5 badges for all these guys up to Glalie, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. These two, I don't know if you need the 6th badge for. I know you need the 6th badge for these because you need the 7th badge for those. Anyway, I got sidetracked. Yeah, these Pokemon are all kind of taken with a grain of salt because of how late you get them. So I'm gonna put Kecleon into decent. It has good stats. It has very good special defense. It has good enough physical attack. But it's kind of the opposite of Castform, where it's type changing all the time actually really hurts it because you lose out on the stab bonuses from your normal type moves as soon as you get hit. So I'm actually going to put it in meh because I think its ability actually holds it back in a lot of cases. But it has obviously a wide move pool. It's a normal type. You get it fair. You don't get it crazy late, but you do get it late, like I was talking about. And yeah, it's type changing all the time is what really hurts it because you lose out on like stab moves that would normally be good. But its coverage is, and you know what, its coverage is good enough to where I'm going to put it in decent anyway. Because it still has a decent enough physical attack to where the moves you're using are going to be doing enough damage. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it in decent because it definitely is held back by its ability, but I don't think as much as I maybe thought before. Banette. I'm gonna put Banette into decent. Banette, I don't know. So you get it at Mount Pyre, which again, is kind of late. Its Shadow Ball hits like a truck, and that's kind of all it does. It is one of it's one of the only ghost types in these games, so it's good for that. It has the normal and fighting type immunities, which would be more useful earlier in the game, but are still useful no matter where you are in the game. Useful against Phoebe for sure, as long as you're careful. Yeah, it's a decent Pokemon. It fires off strong Shadow Balls, and that's kind of it. So Duskclops is a lot more unique of a ghost type. I'm gonna put it in great. Oh, this thing also useful against Tate and Liza, which Duskclops is too. Duskclops is super good defensively, and it's not even at its peak defensive level yet. But Duskclops, you can give it Will-O-Wisp, Confuse Ray, Shadow Punch, and kind of just eat hits throughout the entirety of the game once you get it. The only problem fight for him and Banette too is Sydney, but the move pool for Duskclops and the defensive stats as a ghost type, which is an underrated defensive type, is kind of what puts it above Banette and puts it as a great Pokemon. Okay, Tropius. Wow, garbage, awful, terrible stats. Very mediocre, okay moves. Bad typing. It gets shredded by quite a few things. It has quite a few weaknesses. I wish Tropius was good because if this tier list was based on design, it would be on the other end of the tier list. I think it looks really cool. It's like a leaf dinosaur with bananas growing on its chin. Like that's super creative, but it just does not have any battle utility whatsoever. Like it gets destroyed even in the fights against like Aqua Grunts and Juan and Wallace against their water types. Like it's still gonna be close, even though it's a grass type. Like there are plenty of better grass types, which like is a crazy statement in itself. But like it is completely outclassed. There is no reason to use it except if you like its design, which I get that, but it's bad. All right. Let's see. Chimecho is going to go into meh because it's completely outclassed by the other psychic types. It's slow, it's available late, its move pool isn't as good as Grumpig or Gardevoir, its bulkiness isn't as good as Grumpig or Gardevoir. Again, its speed isn't good enough to be anything at all. Um, it's not useful in a ton of fights after you get it. It has good enough stats to be out of awful, but there's really no reason to use it over Gardevoir or Grumpig. So yeah, I would just say meh for Chimecho. Absol, Absol's kind of in the same category as the other two dark types. Actually, no, it's not really in that category at all. Now that I'm saying it out loud. The Absol being its archetype in Gen 3 stinks. Like it stinks way worse for it than it does for Crawdaunt or Sharpedo because it is also a physical attacking dark type, but it gets no dark moves really besides like bite, and it doesn't have good special attack, so it can't even really take advantage of that. Like at least Crawdaunt and Sharpedo have decent special attack, but the reason that Absol is in the same tier is because it is superior physically, and it gets a wider move pool. I'm pretty sure. So it can definitely still be useful. It hits really hard. It hits like a truck, but it not have actually, you know what? It not having any stab utility at all. And for when it is available in the game, I'm going to put it in meh. It just isn't good enough to justify really using it because like Zangoose kind of fills the same role but has stab. You have other physical attackers that are just hitting really hard that are going to be better than Absol. So I'm going to put it in that. But it has the stats to keep it out of awful. Ninetales. Ooh, Ninetales is interesting one. So you get Vulpix and Mount Pyre. I'm gonna put Ninetales in decent. Ninetales has decent special attack. It has good special defense. Its problem, and actually why I'm gonna move it down to meh too, is you get it right before all the water type trainers start popping up. And it's really not super useful against Magma or Aqua or really any of the other fights, but its stats are good and its typing is fine. Fire typing, it's fine for these games. It just doesn't, it's just not good in the late game, which is really when you're going to use a Ninetales because that's when you get it. So its stats and maybe its typing in some cases keeps it out of awful, but it's in meh because you get it too late for it to really be useful, and it doesn't have the best stats in the world. I'm actually, I'm gonna put Raichu. I'm gonna put Raichu into decent. I feel like unless you're a super good Pokemon at this point, your cap is probably gonna be decent just because of how late you get everything. Everything else that you're gonna use in these games, but Raichu, you get it's kind of the opposite of Ninetales, where you're getting a very useful electric type Pokemon right when the water types start popping up a lot. It's super useful against the Team Aqua fights. It's really good against Wallace and Juan. Yeah, Raichu, it hits hard enough. It has good special attack. It's really fast with its I think base 100 speed. Yeah, Raichu, if you didn't get Manectric or Magneton, can be a good late game electric type solution to the water types that you see everywhere. Golduck is gonna go into meh because, yeah, it's gonna go into meh because it's basically an outclassed water type like a Wailord or like a Gyarados that you also get really late in the game in the Safari Zone, which buries it into like its stats are okay, its moves are okay, but it doesn't really do anything to wow you, and it's available late, and it's not super useful in the rest of the fights of the game. Like it's useful against Tate and Liza, but that's kind of it. Um, so yeah, Golduck, very meh stats. It can get Calm Mind, which is good, but I don't love it being reliant on that as a strategy. So meh for Golduck. I'm gonna put Wobbuffet also into meh. So Wobbuffet is super unique. It has no actual attacking moves, but it has a super high HP stat, and then can just use Counter or Mirror Coat, which do double of whatever the opponent used, as long as you guess whether they used a physical or a special attack. So actually, if you think about it, if you use a guide, you can actually predict really easily what a lot of Pokemon are going to use against Wobbuffet and plan accordingly for it. But it's only going to be useful against like pretty much one, maybe two Pokemon in a given battle before you have to heal it. So I'm going to put Wobbuffet into meh for that reason. Like it is very unique, and its stats are good enough to keep it out of awful, but it's only useful. It's not useful in a ton of situations. It's only really useful in like big battles, which I guess you could argue are the most important battles. Yeah, I'm gonna move it up to decent because of that. It's best in the battles that are most important, but it is a real drag to train it and like have it be a normal Pokemon because it's just not ever going to be that. But I'm gonna keep it in decent just because it is useful in Oh, and you actually can get it a lot earlier than the Pokedex would indicate. I forgot about that. You can get the Why Not egg in Lava Ridge, which is much earlier than what it's being like Pokedex as, which is Mirage Island. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in decent. I'm gonna keep it in decent for that. I like that placement. Okay, Zatu. Um, decent or meh? Gonna put it. I'm gonna put it in decent. I'm just gonna kind of throw Girafarig in there. No, I'm gonna put Girafarig in meh. So I'll get to Zatu first. Zatu is outclassed as a Psychic type and as a Flying type. but it has a really good special attack stat. It does have a pretty unique move pool, and you can teach it Psychic, which it's going to be able to hit hard if it has it. It has a decent speed stat. It's useful in some fights, but not a ton in the late game. So yeah, it's a decent option for the late game. Girafarig goes in meh because it's very outclassed as a normal type. You don't get it until pretty late. It doesn't have great move. Like, it gets crunch, but it's not a good crunch. It's a very mediocre crunch. It just has kind of mediocre written all over it with some unique traits and good enough stats to keep it out of meh. But it's definitely outclassed for both of its types. I'm gonna put Donphan into decent. So Donphan is probably outclassed as a ground type. But it has good stats and like it does hit hard enough and you can get it Earthquake, so like it has some utility, but it's another Pokemon cursed by the end game water types. Actually, I'm gonna put it down in meh because of that. Like, it really struggles against the late game. You know what? It's good against the. Sorry, I'm a little indecisive with this thing. It's good against Magma and it's good against Steven, so I'll keep it in decent. But it is cursed by the late game water types and Team Aqua and things like that, and it doesn't do well against Juan, Wallace, Glacia, any of those battles. So it's really, you got to be picky and choosy, but it does hit hard enough to put it into decent. Pinsir. Sorry, I gotta put this thing back in the meh. You just get it too late in SoundCloud. I'm all over the place with Donphan. I don't know where to put it. Sorry. Anyway, we'll move on to Pinsir. Pinsir's gonna go into meh for a lot of the same reasons as Armaldo. You just can't get it a bug type move. Like, it doesn't get any stab that's good. That isn't like, I don't even know. Is Fury Cutter even a TM in these games? No, I don't think it is. So I don't know what you would teach it for stab. It has good physical attack and physical defense. But it's not really. It's like Zangoose if it didn't have stab moves. Like, which is a lot of the. It's like a lot of Pokemon can be described that way, like Absol and this thing. Like, it just doesn't get stab moves, which are super important to how a Pokemon does. And it's available late enough to where, like, having it just brick break and strength everything is something that other Pokemon can do better for longer. So, like, there's no reason to use it. It has a lot of weaknesses because it's a bug type. It's just not worth it. Heracross is going to go into decent. It being a bug type holds it back, and it being a fighting type puts it forward. So it actually gets stab like Brick Break, which is super useful. It gets stab. It gets an actual bug stab move in Mega Horn. It at a reasonable level. So it can be a useful bug type, which is somewhat of an oxymoron, but Pinsir or Heracross is a strong Pokemon. It has good special defense. It has good physical attack. It is useful for a few fights. It's useful for Sydney. It's useful for Glacia for sure. Juan and Wallace can have trouble with it with their ice types, so it's definitely decent, but it's just available a little bit too late to be anywhere but decent. Rhydon is basically just the same Pokemon as Golem, except available a little later. There's not a huge reason to use it over Golem because you can get Golem a lot earlier and they have very similar stats. But if you didn't catch a Golem and you don't feel like going back and you feel like you want to use it, then it'll do you some good. Again, it doesn't do well against the late game fights that aren't Aqua or Steven or some of Glacia's Pokemon, but even then you have to be careful. So, or not, yeah, wait, what was I saying? It's not good against Aqua, Juan, or Wallace. It is good against Steven, Magma, and Glacia in some cases. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. But yeah, Rhydon, decent. Kind of just the same thing as Golem, but available later. So, Glalie. I'm gonna put Glalie into decent. It doesn't have the best stats in the world, but it's still able to hit like pretty hard with Ice Beam and Crunch. it's useful against some of the what is it useful against? Well, you get it super late, so it's really only useful in like the Elite Four against like Phoebe and Drake, I would say. But it's manageable for the rest of the game, so I'm gonna put it in decent because of that. I would say it's well, ice type, pure ice type isn't a great type. But that isn't really a problem for it unless you're fighting like Steveman or Magma Grunt or like a Magma fighter. So yeah, I'll leave it in decent. All right, Walrein. I'm actually gonna put Walrein into great, in spite of how late you get it. So Walrein pretty much can soak up any hit from when you get it to the end of the game, because of its water typing and its stats. It's a neutral or better matchup for pretty much the rest of the game. Its ice typing is really good against Drake. It's good against Steven because of its water typing. It's good against the Magma Grunts, obviously. I would say Walrein, and it definitely has good stats. Like it has really good like special defense and good enough special attack and a big HP stat. You just have to be a little patient with getting it because it's super late, but it is one of the best water types in these games. If it was available earlier, it would definitely be in busted, but it's not. Let's see, Huntail and Gorbis. Gonna go into decent. So Huntail and Gorbis are available after the 7th gym, which again, that's super late. And they're only available through trade, which is true of a few Pokemon in these games. But I like to think that if you're playing these games, hopefully it's either with the ability to trade or on an emulator that allows for you to go through trade evolutions, like even using like the randomizer with none of the randomized settings. There are a lot of ways to get around that. But anyway, Huntail and Gorbis have decent stats, have decent move pools. Huntail's a little bit more of a mixed attacker, which can be good because it can get some physical utility. Whereas Gorbis is more of a special attacker, which is good because it gets special utility. So Clamperl would also go into the decent tier, honestly, even unevolved, because if you let it hold the deep sea scale, its special attack doubles, and its special attack stat is already pretty decent, and its defensive stats are good. But I'm using Clamperl as a placeholder for something else that we'll get to. So Clamperl will go right alongside of them, but they're just available too late and aren't super strong against anything but Team Magma for the rest of the game. So yeah, it doesn't really bode super well for them, but their stats are really good and they're water types, so decent it is. Corsola. Corsola and Relicanth. Actually, I'm gonna put Corsola into awful. There's no reason to use it. There are way better rock types. There are way better water types, and its stats are atrocious. Like it doesn't have good defensive stats. Like it has mediocre defenses and terrible offenses. Like its stats are so bad and it's available so late. There's no reason to use it. Relicanth, there's a little bit more reason to use it. Like it has decent physical attack. Like it can hit for decent physical damage, but again, outclassed as a water type, outclassed as a rock type, can't really hit with special attacks. It is good defensively, but it's not great defensively. It's just good defensively. Like water rock is an okay defensive type, but Lantern is gonna join Relicanth and Meh for almost the same. Actually, yeah. So Lantern hits weaker, but also kind of by proxy with how many water types there are, hits harder because of its electric type stab. But again, it's a decent defensive Pokemon with decent defensive stats and a decent defensive typing, but it's just not all that useful in any fights that aren't like Juan or Wallace maybe, or like random trainers on the water routes. Like you're getting to a point where there are just not a ton of fights where this thing is going to be able to be used in. So it'll go into meh for that reason. So Clamp Pearl is placeholding for Love Disc, which for whatever reason was not on this tier list at all. So Love Disc is a literal piece of garbage. Like you can look at like the Smogon descriptions for its moveset, and it's just like never use this thing. It is awful. It is PU. It is terrible. It doesn't even get into PU. Like it gets bodied in PU. It's so bad in all the games. Like it's supposed to be a glass cannon, but can't do any damage. Like yes, it'll outspeed you and then do nothing to you. And sometimes it won't even outspeed you. Like it's useless. It's completely useless, completely outclassed. Terrible Pokemon. Kingdra. So Seadra and Kingdra are a little bit different because Seadra doesn't have water typing. So I'm gonna put Kingdra. Ooh, do I put no? I'm gonna put Kingdra in decent just because of how late you get it, and it doesn't get great Dragon type moves to to take advantage of because you can't get it Dragon Claw, but it has good typing. It's only weak to Dragon, so it's useful in every fight that isn't Drake for the rest of the game. But yeah, it doesn't have the utility that other Pokemon of its typing do because of how late it's available. And again, like it's got a really good typing, it's got really good stats, but I just can't put it anywhere that isn't decent because it's really only useful in like Victory Road, like as like a standout. Like otherwise, it's a good Pokemon. It'll hit hard with Surf, but like there's plenty of reason to use other Pokemon, and there's more utility to be had in other Pokemon because they're available earlier. Okay, so I think Salamence is the only Pokemon that is only available after the 8th gym exclusively. It's just it's so good. It's got such amazing stats. It's a pseudo legendary. It's a pseudo legendary, which has its pros and has its cons. So I'm gonna put it in decent. Which is a crazy thought. It's just not available early enough to be useful in a ton of fights. Like it's useful against Drake and gonna be good everywhere else, obviously, but it is a pain in the ass to train. Um, like it's a very mixed bag. It has great move pool, it has great stats, it has a good typing, but it's available so late. You literally can't use it on a gym leader. Like it's not super useful in the Elite Four outside of Drake, because of the abundance of ice types and rock types and steel types, which it doesn't do well against. But whatever else you want to do in the game, Salamence is your man. So the Reggies are all interesting cases. They're available after you get Dive. I'm gonna put Regirock into decent. No, I'm gonna put Regirock into meh, and then Regice and Registeel into decent. So Regirock goes in meh because Pure Rock is a bad typing and it doesn't really get great rock moves to take advantage of its good physical attack. But you know what? I'm gonna put it in decent because it swallows physical hits like no other. It is going to be super useful for the Elite Four. It's useful against Glacia, and you can get it rock type moves, obviously. It's useful for Glacia. It's going to tank pretty much all of Phoebe's strongest attacks, and realistically, most of Sydney's strongest attacks and Drake's strongest attacks. But rock typing isn't great for when you get it. But it's good. They're all in decent. Because they have really good stats. They're just again, it's the curse of being available too late. Like Regice is super useful against Drake, and that's pretty much the only battle that it's super useful in. But again, it hits super hard and with like Ice Beam and stuff, and has very good special defense. And then Registeel is a little bit more of a unique case where it doesn't hit super hard, but it swallows pretty much every hit that it's gonna see really well for the rest of the game. It just is available super late and doesn't have the great damage output like the other two. But Registeel definitely belongs with them because of its type. Its typing is just like objectively better than the other two's typing, and it does have utility. Okay, so these four are the non-traded, like the base evolutions of the traded Pokemon, and then Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. So you can only get each of them in the main story in one game. So Groudon in Ruby, they're all really good. Obviously, they tear through the Elite Four. I'm gonna put these two. I can't put them in a decent. I might have to. I don't know what to do. Are they great? Like, are they great? But you can't use them outside of the Elite Four. Hmm. Decisions. I'm gonna just throw them all into great. Honestly, Rayquaza. I guess if I give context, it doesn't fully matter where I place them in the tier list. I mean, it does, but it matters less because they are very unique. So, Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza all will tear through the Elite Four. They're legendaries. They'll tear through any trainer that they see fit, but they're not used in enough of the game to put them in busted. Rayquaza you get at level 70 with a Master Ball. I don't know why they made it level 70 when you catch it in the main story, but it literally just will destroy the Elite Four. Like whenever I play Emerald, I have a rule that I can't use it because it just desecrates everything. Like even Glacia doesn't stand a chance. Like it's too fast and hits way too hard. Like nothing stands a chance against it. Kyogre and Groudon are kind of the same way, but just to a lesser extent because they're a little bit lower of a level and their stats aren't quite as good for just trucking through Pokemon, but they're both still insanely good. Groudon hits like a truck, Kyogre hits like a truck. If you could get them at any point earlier in the games than you do, they would probably be in busted, but they're available so late that they're just not quite there. All right, so that is the tier list. That's the end of part 2. So Busted is a very exclusive club in these games. Great. There aren't a ton of options, but there's still plenty. Decent and meh are somewhat large categories, and then awful. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any other Pokemon. Maybe Castform will go into awful on some people's tier list, but I think these are pretty definitively the awful Pokemon. I like this list. Let me know if you have any changes, any disagreements you would have. And if you liked it, you could subscribe. You could like the video. It wouldn't hurt anybody. But yeah, thanks for watching, and have a nice day, everybody.